It's not the same as live, but we'll make it work. See you soon.
Hello, I'm John McFarlane. I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself, and it starts when I was a teenager. I had a job working at UBC quite frequently as an IT technician, more or less, running slide projectors and movies and so on, entirely driven by nepotism, because my mother ran the whole series. Then I went away to university in the States, and I needed a job. So I went into the AV, it was called then the AV department, and they were delighted to see me because they didn't have anybody. And so I ended up spending 4 years doing concerts and sound, movies, the whole 9 yards. This was an unusual small college that had in Portland, Oregon. It had a really thorough, interdisciplinary, and quite remarkable performance series, including people like Ali Akbar Khan, the Indian musician Ravi Shankar, theater groups like the Living Theater, dance groups, folk musicians. It just went on and on and on. After that, I ended up actually being asked to be the technical director in a small theater complex at the college. And we actually built a no theater, a Japanese no theater. From that, I ended up through a whole series of strange coincidences going to New York City, and I spent 6 years there working on the construction of a performing arts complex, which had a rather remarkable group of resident artists from Alvin Nicolai, Murray Lewis Dance Theaters, a number of groups like the Open Theater, Joseph Chaikin, names that probably are not that familiar to people now, but were incredibly important at the time. And what we were really supposed to be doing was building the building, which was called the Space for Innovative Development. Now, along the way, I ended up stopping that for a period of time and becoming the co-owner of a stained glass business while continuing to tour with ragtime musicians, et cetera, et cetera. The same strange set of people and coincidences actually brought me to Simon Fraser University in the second year of the credit program, which was then called the Center for the Arts, and is now the School for Contemporary Arts, where you are now studying. And this was actually to found the technical theater program, which we decided not to call technical theater because we were dealing with many disciplines other than theater, so we called it production and design.
And what year was that, John?
That was 1977. And in fact, this is my last semester here. And so I have continued to do those things. I morphed from being a regular technician with a focus on audio to lighting designer, although really it's most accurate to say that I'm a technical director. I've used skills from a wide variety of backgrounds. I was a commercial fisherman for 4 summers. I was a tree planter for 3 summers. I've done construction off and on since I was a teenager, and all of those things have been valuable for my career. That's probably enough about me. I'd like you, though, to reflect on that range of backgrounds, and when you fill in the survey on Canvas, which is about to be mounted, and I ask you, do you have any relevant background? I'm saying, what kind of skills could you think would be relevant to production and design for the performing arts?
Great. Thank you, John.
The voice you've been hearing on the other side of the camera is my colleague Vlad Vojno, who will give you a bit of his background.
Hi, everybody. I'm Vlad Vojno. I am a new faculty here at the School for Contemporary Arts. I teach in production and design. My primary specialty is in projection and video design, working with cameras and pre-recorded footage, editing content, but I've also worked as a lighting designer, as a technical director, as a set designer. I've worked on several touring shows, and I'm as well a associate member of the Wooster Group in New York City. I'm really excited to kind of help John this term with the 170 class, and I look forward to answering all of your questions.
And Vlad, how did you get captured into this field?
Oh, I think, I'm originally from Colombia, and I've moved around my whole life. I've lived in Colombia, Costa Rica, Connecticut, Florida, Wisconsin, Colombia, Costa Rica, Brazil, Vancouver, Banff, Vancouver, Calgary, New York, New Haven, and then Vancouver again. And I feel like when I was in Wisconsin, I was in a public high school that had a very large theater program. And I remember the first production I ever worked on was a production of Dracula. And it had everything that you could ever imagine. It had a hydraulic lift with a bunch of hidden doors where Dracula could come out of. And it had hidden doors on the set. And we had flying bats with LED eyes. And there was just so many things. And that's sort of my favorite part about what we do, is that you're never working on the same thing twice. There's always going to be variation. And it just captures you. It's such a varied field. You're never in an office working on one thing. There's always going to be an evolution. And so I feel like once I discovered that, I caught on to it, and it kind of mixed all the things that I was in love with. It has visual art, it has music, it has performance, it has the live element. And for me, that's sort of been the passion ever since.
Excellent.
Thank you, John. All right. Here.
Okay, I'll tell you about the history of the development of this building, the Goldcorp Center for the Arts. Originally, the School for Contemporary Arts, or its predecessor, was up on the campus, on the main campus in Burnaby. And the curious thing about that was we had essentially responsibility fully, once the credit program was started, for the SFU Theater. And it's still there on the campus. It's I forget what it's called now, but it's the lecture hall, maybe it's the Diamond Lecture Hall, but it's right across from the main library. And it's actually quite an interesting facility, because it was built in the 1960s when the university was founded as the sort of classic multi-use facility. And on some level, the history of its evolution as a theater was to remove a lot of the multi-purpose stuff and make it more generally useful for what it was actually doing. Other than that facility, our facilities were a set of trailers that came across Canada to celebrate Confederation. That's 1967, and had been blended together to make a theater, a curious theater that had 8 or 10 columns right smack in the middle of it, where they'd taken out the walls of the trailers, and where you could literally jump up and touch the lighting equipment. Then the rest of the facility was essentially a collection of leftover buildings that had been put up for the education facility, et cetera, et cetera. And so everything was a kind of a compromise except the one big theater. For the whole history of the School for Contemporary Arts up until the 2000s, we had been promised over and over again that we were finally going to get a building. And because of that, we had a very long history of thinking about what we would really like to have as a building. And we had representatives of all of the performing arts disciplines and visual art and film, thinking about that constantly. And we even had a programming exercise with architectural firm, and we would go and pursue various alternatives and look at how we would take something like, in fact, Robson Square and turn it into a facility for us, or ironically, at one point, this facility, the Woodwards Complex, where we are now. So when it actually came to fruition and we were going to be part of the downtown East Side renewal to make the Goldcorp Center for the Arts, we had a very extravagant plan with lots of thought behind it and a very articulate group of people who'd been thinking about a facility like this.
And from what areas? What areas in the School for Contemporary Art?
There were people from the music program whose particular focus was on acoustics and thinking about the kinds of places that you would want to perform and create in. But as many of you probably know, it's also a program based in electroacoustic and computer-based music, and in composition, and with a big component of world music. We had people from the dance department that were very, very aware of all of the things that could affect dance training and dance performance, a particular kind of focus in theater performance. Film program that had been there a very long time, in fact, before the School for Contemporary Arts, and visual art program working out of fairly minimal facilities, to be honest, and then finally actually getting access to a facility downtown on the waterfront near the downtown East Side, which is actually still there, and the beginnings of art and culture studies and so on. So we had a wide range of people interested in what kind of a facility would work for us, and we had a particular point of view on that. Plus, I think it's important to say that we worked in these facilities that were really not ideal. So we had a lot of knowledge about what didn't work.
Right.
So for example, one of the things I would say about the SFU Theater is it was designed with a very particular way of thinking about what a performance facility would be, and it was not terribly easy to modify anything. So this is the background to actually thinking about what kind of a facility we would really want. And when you consider that our blue sky plan immediately had to be reduced by 40%, the process that arrived in this building was one of distilling what we really thought was important to get to the Goldcorp Center. So I know this building from the ground up.